Hi, I'm Sifu Grant.
Hi, I'm Dave Doss.
And today we're going to look at leverage grips on the arms and on the body that can be used in conjunction with certain directions of force to unbalance your partner or your opponent. So, usually when we are working on these kinds of techniques, we do it within a game called Tuisha, which is usually called push hands. And there are two versions of that. One, we can be in what's called a fixed step or fixed stance, which means that we're not allowed to move our feet. Or it can be in a moving step where we are allowed to use our feet as well as using the leg to sweep and trip our opponent. All right. So we'll start off in a right versus right. I'm down here on my knees because otherwise Dave Doss has a severe height and reach disadvantage. All right, so we're in right side forward stance, and we're going to start off just crossing our bridges, which means we're just going to connect at the back of the wrist. And we're going to take a look at, from this position, how we can get into some of the different grips to gain leverage. So one of the first and most basic ones is an outside gate wrist grab. So Dave Doss is just going to turn his hand over and seize my wrist. All right, make sure your elbow stays down and relaxed. Once he has my wrist, he can extend my arm by drawing me out, either across my body, or maybe he can pull it out here. There's a variety of different things that he can do with it to make me lose my balance this way. So just go ahead, Dave Doss, sink in your root and pull me sort of out there towards the light. All right. Now, whether or not he made me take a step in fixed stance or he used that as leverage to set up some other kind of move like a takedown, doesn't really matter. The point is to understand the grip, where to grab, and how to use it for leverage. He can also combine the wrist grab with an elbow or upper arm grab. So he's going to do the outside gate wrist and arm grab. So he's actually grabbing, let me roll up my sleeve a little bit, he's actually grabbing just above the elbow joint. Not right on the elbow joint, which actually is not as good leverage. And not below the elbow joint, because if I can bend the elbow, I can escape that. If he goes too far up the shoulder, I can still bend the elbow and escape that. So if he gets right on the elbow, he has what we call elbow control, which actually makes it very difficult for me to escape this grip or use my arm to apply force to him. And it also makes it hard for me to reach him with this arm, because the moment that I try anything with this arm, he can block me with it, or he could just pull me out like he did before with twice the power, now that he has two hands on the arm. All right. In this same leverage grip, he can straighten out my arm, and then he can drive power forward through my shoulder towards my central axis to knock me backwards. He can even combine the two, pulling and pushing depending on where he feels resistance. So for example, if he begins to pull and I'm resisting, then he can suddenly drive forward, and that'll probably knock me back with more power since I'm already pulling in the same direction, so that way he follows the force. Grab it here. And the same token, if he tries to push on it and I push back, he suddenly pulls in changing directions and makes me take a step, makes me fall over, sets up a fast and powerful takedown. So this wrist and arm on the outside gate is a really good set of leverage points. And you can also use it to transfer to other leverage points, which we'll show in just a moment. But from here, he can also get the wrist and upper arm or elbow crease by changing gates. So he's going to do the inside gate. He's going to thread his other arm through, circle around, grab my wrist here, and again grab my upper arm. Now here, there's a couple different ways that he could get leverage, but right now he's just going to do the grab. And this time, especially when you're on the inside gate, if you use a twisting force, it's going to immediately begin to act on the shoulder, which is going to start to make me actually fall backwards. So let's go ahead and twist, just like that. All right? And once he's done that, he can pull, he can push, he can do a variety of things since he's broken my structure. So why don't you just go ahead and pull me towards the door after twisting. All right. Once again to the inside gate, he threads. Now here, rather than grabbing my upper arm, he can put pressure in the elbow crease. He can do that with his hand, he can do that with his forearm, and we would still call this wrist an arm, a wrist and elbow leverage. And here, he can sink in his stance and drive his forearm through my elbow towards the ground as he twists my wrist. And again, using that elbow leverage, he's going to take me to the ground. Now, go back to the inside gate, Devdas. Once he grabs my wrist and he goes to give me that pressure, if he doesn't move my elbow away from my stance, he can move it away from my stance that way, going backwards. He can move it away from my stance sideways. He can even move it away from my stance by pulling my elbow across and driving it in the other direction. But if he tries to just drive straight down into my stance, I can hold him here all day because he's literally just driving down into my structure, right? And I can support his weight. And even if I was smaller and lighter than him, if I have a half-decent stance, I'll be able to support his weight here. But if he pushes down, the moment that he changes direction just a little bit that way or backwards, go ahead, I lose balance. So whether you're on the inside gate or the outside gate, having a hand on the wrist, having a hand on the elbow is going to give you good leverage and many different opportunities to unbalance your opponent depending on where their force is going and their stance structure. So from here, we're going to take a look at an underhook, which can be very similar to a wrist and elbow, but has enough differences to make it important. So let's take a look at the inside gate again. So go ahead and thread under and grab a hold of my wrist. Now here, he's not so much doing this to get the wrist control, he's just sort of opening up the inside gate, and he's going to come under and he's going to hook my shoulder in his elbow, and then he's just going to pull his thumb towards his shoulder and his elbow towards his hip. Go ahead. And that sucks me in. Now, from this position, his leverage is going to take me off balance. But if I was on my feet and not my knees, I might still have my balance here a little bit, or at the very least I haven't fallen yet. But if he's got this shoulder hugged in nice and tight, and he has his arm locked out straight, he can push my wrist away and pull the shoulder just by turning his body towards the mirror. And then he'll really throw me around. And of course, he can use that in conjunction with some leg techniques to create throws and takedowns. And he can also use it once again to set up the opposite move. So let's go from here. Go ahead, thread under, open the inside gate, get that shoulder hook, pull it in tight to your body. Now, if he starts to turn towards the mirror, but I resist him, he can immediately hug this arm into his body and just turn the opposite way to throw me down. So here we see how these leverage points have multiple directions of use, not just for a single technique. All right. So now we're going to take a look at a collar tie, basic collar tie. And so from here, he can either thread, he can reach over actually with his back hand and just snatch back here. Now he wants to create, here, remove your hand for a second. He wants to create this sort of a hook shape. He doesn't want to try to grab with his fingertips or lay over his whole wrist like that. He wants to create sort of a hook with his hand that's going to contour my neck. And once he has that, he wants to be very careful that his elbow is not up and out at all. This is very easy to escape. Sorry. Once he has this, he wants to make sure that his elbow is dropping and that it's moving towards the center of my chest. Now this accomplishes a couple of things. One, it makes the hold much stronger so that he has more leverage, which is the whole point of this video. But it also creates a barrier for me to move in. If I want to move in on him, he can just drive the elbow towards my chest a little bit, and I'm going to have a very hard time, and that allows him to feel where my body's going and where the pressure is. Then he can use the hooking hand to either tug me this way or that way. Go ahead. Or he can use the surface of his forearm to push me. Either direction. Right? So here, he's got great leverage because he's right on my central axis. Right? From my head to my feet, or at least to the bottom of my pelvis, my tailbone, he's got pretty much control over where that tilts. And once he tilts my central axis, he's broken my structure, and that's a great beginning for a whole lot of other techniques. All right? He can also do what's called a reverse collar tie. So let's switch hands. So with the reverse collar tie, it's the same concept, but you're going to reach across. You're still hooking the back of the neck, and your elbow is right here, and you have all of the same possibilities. You can pull with the hand, pulling me forward off balance. You can drive with the forearm, pushing me away. You can drive a little more with the elbow and drive me to the side. Or you can pull with the hand and pull me to the side. You pretty much can go in any direction, and once again you have that barrier, so if I try to grab or move in, you can hold me back with your forearm. And if I'm pressing and I'm really trying to use effort and weight and strength, that's going to give you that much more control over where I am, because the moment that he softens this and turns, I'm going to go right down because he had the structure that he could use to hold me back, but then he also has the shape of his arm and the leverage on my spine to be able to control what direction I go. So he can just remove that support and tug me to the ground. All right. Now he can also double up his collar tie, just go in for the double collar tie. All right, so the hands, you want to have them overlapping, one and then the other. And right now he's got his elbows a little wide, which could be a problem for him. I could sneak in for my own. I could sneak in and begin to break his hold on me because I can get a hold of his elbows. So he wants to keep his elbows squeezed together, but he doesn't want to let that pull his hands apart, which it just did. His hands started to come apart like this. And if that happens, he's going to lose the hold on my neck. I'll be able to sort of muscle out and break free. So he's got to keep his hands overlapped. Don't lose that, and squeeze his elbows. Now, it's okay if your elbows don't touch, Dave does. You just want to squeeze. Now, if they don't touch because my neck is too big, well, then that's my problem, not your problem, because it's squeezing my neck and I'm not going to be able to get down. He still has the barrier. As a matter of fact, he has a double barrier for me to get to him. He can drive with his elbows and forearms. He can pull with his hands. He can steer with his forearms just by turning his body. Go ahead. And the other way. Right? And he can pretty much shake me about however he wants to as I kind of struggle with this. But of course, we want to follow the force. So whatever he feels me doing, he's going to follow that. So that there's no effort. Now right there, I was sort of pulling down on his elbows, which is a common thing for people to do. They just try to hug up on their arms to get some feeling of control. So he just relaxed his chest, relaxed his ribs, sunk his stance, and turned his body, and I went down. And that's where our yielding aspect comes in from our push hands training, where we learn not to fight the force, but to allow whatever force is coming in to just go through as we sort of disappear and get out of its way and come out behind it and help it go in the direction it was already going with just a little bit of variation to our advantage. All right, finally, we have the body wrap. All right, and with the body wrap, you literally essentially just wrap an arm around the body, just like that. Now, Dave Das is a good bit smaller than me, so a body wrap here might be a little difficult. But he can wrap the body with one arm. You have it just fine. And you can even use your fingers to sort of squeeze into my ribs a little bit. And then this other one, his other hand can just go right here on my body. And now he's got me sort of like as if he's holding the ball. And then he can roll that ball. So if he sinks in his stance, he pulls this back hand backwards towards the windows, which is that direction. And he pushes this hand into my ribs and then rolls that around towards the windows. As he sort of tilts me this way, then he's going to cause me to basically flip onto my back. And that's another great leverage point, and one that sometimes people don't expect, because you still feel pretty solid when somebody's wrapping around your body. You don't yet feel like somebody's got great leverage. But if he feels my force coming in, and I'm like this, and he's wrapped my body, and I'm kind of leaning on him, trying to bear my weight on him. Maybe I'm trying to make him feel tired, or I'm mistaken, I don't understand stance structure, and so I think by leaning on him, I'm applying force, which I'm really not applying useful force. I'm applying force that's going to get me in trouble. Because Dave Das knows as soon as he feels me leaning, all he's got to do is relax and turn, sinking into his stance, and I'll go over. And so this pretty much carries us through the primary upper body leverage points. Now we can push or drive or extend force towards the person's center, right? So if I have this one like we did before, I can drive force towards his center. I can draw force away from his center. Or I can twist force onto the grip. Now, when you drive force, obviously that's generally going to make somebody go away from you. And when you use drawing force, that's usually going to make somebody come towards you, although we're going to try to pull them around our center. But when you twist, they don't necessarily move. Their structure just breaks and crumbles. So you'll notice I have the arm by the wrist and the elbow, or upper arm just above the elbow. And as I twist his arm, his joints run out of room. His wrist, then his elbow, then his shoulder. Now his spine starts to move, his hips twist. Now he's doing a pretty good job sinking into his stance, but his knees just hit the ground, and that's going to crumble his stance. And then I can take him the rest of the way down if I want to. And of course, if I begin to twist and I feel him resisting back the other way, I can just twist back the other way and send him rolling back that way. You good? Okay. All right, so these are our basic leverages. So we're just going to go through a couple of different leverage points as we sort of duel each other a bit, just so you can get a chance to see how we might get into them and how they might be countered and how we use those counters to help us flow into the next one. A little bit closer to us. All right, so we're just going to start with a couple rotations. And then we're just going to move right into some freestyle. And you can see some of the ways that we defend ourselves. You're going to have to solve that. Go ahead. If I'm pulling, what's the answer? There you go. Go ahead, squeeze your elbows together more than you might have it. Yep. Here, let's give us a little bit more space so that maybe our friends can see a little bit more, and I'll stand up. Here we're just doing a fixed stance practice, so we're not moving our feet. If we do, the other person wins that round, gains a point. Now the idea here is not to use strength. So Dave, Das, and I can practice together, and although I have a reach advantage, he can still gain skill, I can still gain skill, because we're using sensitivity, and we're going with the force, and we're using leverage. There I got a nice little collar tie after he stopped me from doing something else. He's doing a good job blocking me. But Dave Goss, I'd like to see a little bit more use of the leverage controls. Good. There he applied twisting and pulling so that I couldn't just simply extend my arm. Good job, Dave Goss. Come over here, buddy. Let's say goodbye. All right, so these leverage points and ways of grabbing are really just sort of points on the map that you want to navigate as you play with your partners to improve your skill. I think if you do that, you'll start to see that you can affect these leverage points not just with grabbing with your hands, but you can affect them with almost any part of your arm or body and be able to create these driving, drawing, and twisting forces to unbalance your partner and also to save yourself from being unbalanced. You did a great job, buddy. All right, hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.